Kenya for the last 10 years. So starting from the year 2010, we reviewed studies from, carried out by the government, studies carried out by non-governmental organizations, and several studies also carried out by individuals. So we will have it on the screen. And the focus is going to be on 3 issues: on physical violence, sexual violence, and emotional violence. There are so many other concerns that affect children today, like we know, but we want to focus on these 3. And this is not to say that they're the only issues, but it's for purposes of having a discussion and for purposes of having, a starting point. And recently, 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, in 2019, the government actually, through the Department of Children's Services, carried out a national survey. And this national survey was the second. They had done another one in the year 2010. And in this national survey, we were able to see that violence against children is still high. The rates of violence against children are very, very high. And you would imagine that, with all the work that we've done, with all the work that, we have had from SUPKEM, we've had from the churches, there's so much that has been going on, yet the levels and the rates of violence against children remain high. So we want to understand, why does this continue? Why is it persistent, and what can we do? So out of this forum, we want to see what the current status is, and want to see what approaches or what strategies have been used already, and how much successful they've been or not. And then at the end of it all, we've already had a few recommendations coming out, and we also have several others that would also want to make, specifically to religious leaders and to the faith communities seated here or following online, because like we know, Kenyans are very religious, and I think we have a big opportunity through the faith communities to carry out a lot of work in child protection. So the World Health Organization estimates that 1 out of 2 children globally suffer some form of violence each year. This is the same situation in Kenya, 1 out of 2 children. So I want to imagine all of us seated here. You also have an experience that we went through, because it's not starting now, it has always been there. And what does it mean? Children are almost half of the Kenyan population. So we are talking about many, many children suffering various forms of violence, and a lot of it is not even addressed. So a lot of children are moving around with a lot of trauma. The same children we have in our schools, and we can see what has been happening in the schools. And then from the 2019 national survey that I talked about from Kenya, the findings were that nearly half of females and more than half of males, so both children of both genders, are equally affected by violence against children. We then want to see how that has then affected them, and we know that from that research and others, that a lot of children will not tell anyone. So 41%, for example, of children who experienced sexual violence or who have experienced sexual violence in childhood will tell someone. What about the other 59? They don't tell anyone. And what are the reasons? A lot of times it's fear of being blamed, fear of retaliation, fear of revenge, and also the fear of not being believed. Others, about 34%, know where to get help from. So it means that there are many others, about 66, who do not know where they can get help from. And therefore, they stay with the problem. Then we also have the experience of experiencing harm when corporal punishment or corporal discipline is is meted out. And we have quite a high percentage of children who suffer physical harm or injury. We have about 42% of children suffering some sort of physical injuries after corporal punishment is given to them. And what is worrying, like we have heard from previous speakers, is that there's a lot of violence at home. So physical violence and injuries resulting from it when a child has been disciplined by a caregiver or a parent, we have about 36.9%. So about 37% of children suffer injuries in the house out of physical violence. We also have a lot of injuries coming from peer abuse, peer violence. So we have a lot of bullying among peers. So children with other children abusing each other, being violent to each other. And we have about 47% of children experiencing physical injury from peer violence. So that's very high. And it tells us that bullying in Kenya is really a problem that needs attention. Then we also know that there are many other impacts. Apart from physical injury, we also have mental health distress. We also have other consequences that will arise from violence. And from the data we have children who have experienced sexual violence, expressing or suffering from mental health issues, up to about 58% of children who have suffered sexual violence go on to experience mental health issues. 58% is a very, very high number. Therefore, the need for services, need for help when this violence occurs is very high. We also look at children who experience mental health issues after physical violence has happened are about also 57%. So they are very, very close to the numbers of the sexual violence victims. But children who experience emotional violence experience the most mental health disorders at 77%. And the challenge with mental health, or rather the challenge with emotional health is that emotional violence, the challenge with it is that a lot of times it is quiet, you don't see it because it's in the household, for example. It's from a teacher to a child, in form of verbal abuse, belittling, saying nasty things about a child, mocking them and things like that. So emotional violence is likely to affect more children, and it's likely to go unattended because it sort of does not have those physical injuries or those or physical indicators, and therefore it's a hidden menace. So 77% of children in the 2019 survey expressed mental health distress problems after experiencing emotional violence. We also saw from that survey that there were also more boys living on the streets, and there were also more boys getting into conflict with the law. So you find a lot of boys in the courts, a lot of boys in the justice system, more than girls. We also saw peer-to-peer violence perpetrated by classmates, schoolmates, and peers in the neighborhood. This is what I talked about earlier, the bullying issue. It appears to be quite big as well. However, we know children now are accessing the internet either through the mobile phones, through tablets, through computers, And now with COVID, a lot more children went online because they needed to study, they needed to research, and generally also to connect, communicate. And so online abuse cases have gone up, and they take many forms with equally devastating impact on the health. That of teenage pregnancies and child marriages. And I'm sure during the COVID-19 pandemic, you know, all of us here must have seen in the news or heard on the radio and even on social media of the number of children who are reported to be of girls, especially of girls. This affects girls to be pregnant. And we had quite a big discussion nationally. But the truth is, COVID-19 just accelerated, just increased the numbers. But child marriage and teenage pregnancies have always been there. In fact, Kenya is said to have a prevalence rate of 23% for child marriages. 23% of children, of girls, are pregnant or are in a child marriage. the neighborhoods. Notably, younger children than before became targets of sexual violence due to lack of supervision, reduced parental monitoring, and offenders being home, therefore having increased opportunities to do so. On average, child sexual violence victims are now aged 12 years compared to 16 years previously. So this is research, these are research findings that the age has really gone down. It's very sad, as it means then that we have a lot of work to do, because if they are violated when they are that young, they really have a long way to go before they can recover and become and before they can be restored. So I think one of the speakers before had also talked about parents feeling the burden of having children at home. For the first time, or maybe this is one of the times that parents have had to have children for a long time in their houses, and they are not used to this. It also points to something that I think we have heard before about parents shifting their burden to teachers. So for this reason, school closures had a big impact. In addition, social isolation, people now could not meet, people now could not visit, loss of incomes and livelihoods, as well as high levels of tension at the family level were found to have exposed children to an increased risk of family violence. A lot of tension because parents are not able to provide, they're not able to engage in their daily business, and that stress resulted in increased violence, not just towards the children, but to the entire family unit. The pandemic also shifted the role of protecting children, previously performed by teachers, to parents who found it hard to manage. School closures resulted in a notable increase in child abuse cases, ranging from teenage pregnancies, physical and sexual abuse, drug and substance abuse, defilement of minors, and child labor, among other concerns. We also experienced a lot of child abduction cases. Unfortunately, they are still continuing. And we have this organization called Missing Child Kenya. In 2020, in their annual report, they handled a total of 242 children. These are just the cases that were reported to them. There are many others that do not necessarily get to be reported, and there are many others that do not even get resolved. I think this is, this indicates that there's also many dangers surrounding children. They have nowhere to hide, actually. Not in the community, not in the homes, and not even in the larger society. I had also mentioned about online abuse, and Communications Authority of Kenya, CAK, notes that the use of internet in Kenya has increased significantly in recent years. And as a result, an increasing number of children now have unsupervised access to the internet via personal computers or mobile phones. While children can and do derive great benefit from internet access, it also renders them vulnerable to risks such as exposure to fraudulent practices, exposure to unsuitable content, including pornography, drug abuse, and potential harassment such as cyberbullying, sexting, and violence from third parties. This was already there even before COVID. But the fact that now we have more children online, we have more children now accessing unsupervised content, means then that the problem has been doubled or multiplied. And so we have seen from the research, family members themselves, either parents and adult relatives, as well as siblings. We have authority figures, such as teachers in other members in the society. We have children themselves, and as well as others who we may call strangers. But what then this means is that this problem is with us. It is extensive. It is persistent. When you think about the children who are committing peer-to-peer violence, it means then that's a future generation that's already engaging in violence. And so this need to really look at the perpetrators and have strategies that address these specific perpetrators. Some speakers have talked about programs targeting parents, targeting also other adults in the society. Because if we have enough adults in the society who also act as bystanders, people who are there and who are ready to take action when they see violence taking place or when they see certain things happening, then we are likely to have a safer society. Let's also think about the role of the media and think about what we've been able to see through the media and how it has impacted levels of violence, for example, but also highlighting the occurrence of violence and therefore instigating or encouraging action against. So normalization of violence through music and other programs cannot be ignored. And I think we have seen the Kenya Film Commission Board trying to call out artists and media houses that propagate violence through their programs. I think that is a good way to go. Frequent exposure to media violence can desensitize people to violence in the real world. Watching too much violence, exposure to so much violence, sort of, when you're exposed to something for, you get a feeling like this is normal. It goes on. So it can be a contributor to aggressive behavior, especially in children. However, we need to commend the media. They have done a big job, a positive contribution in highlighting violence against children as a major social problem. Today we see wide coverage by media houses of violence against children through television documentaries and investigative reporting. This exposure does encourage action from relevant authorities. Because when we see that, then we are calling on the relevant government departments. What are you doing about this? And it also serves to prick our conscience as a society on these ills. In fact, at the moment, I believe UNICEF and KTN have an ongoing partnership. They are running a lot of stories. They are running a lot of programs on TV on violence against children since I think the month of May. And whenever I see that, I'm always thinking, this is what we need. We need more actors, we need more media houses to engage in this so that we get sensitized and we get also to understand the gravity of the problem. So violence against children is said to be driven by a variety of factors that are cultural in nature, social and economic. So negative cultural beliefs, like girls have to be cut, for example, or girls have to get married early, and so many others. Poverty, the inability to provide, that then leads parents and guardians pushing their to go out and get to beg on the streets, engage in child labor where they also get exploited. Ignorance as well, because a lot of us and a lot of people do not necessarily know what the law provides, what the law requires of them. We also have a challenge with parenting skills and values. Remember those young girls who are becoming mothers. How much do they know about parenting? How much are they able also to provide for the children? So we have a challenge there. We also have changing family structures, either because of death, and COVID also produced a lot of orphans. Also, parent families where, for one reason or the other, only one parent is available. We also have social acceptance of violent norms. A lot of times, and possibly you have seen this, whenever there's domestic violence in a household, very few people will go to intervene. Why? Those are domestic matters. Sometimes even the police will tell you, those are internal matters, go sort them out, go back and talk. So social acceptance of violent norms is a major contributor. That's why, for example, a parent or even a teacher will be able to seriously injure a child in the name of corporal punishment, disciplining the child, and nobody will intervene. I mean, children need to be punished, and that is the only way to do it. So social acceptance of violent norms really contributes a lot, and I think that should be the first thing that we need to deal with. It's also a systemic issue. Systemic meaning it's very, very deeply rooted in our upbringing, in our cultural norms, and also in our attitudes. And you find that whenever you have cultural attitudes that demean women, children will also be part of that category. So it needs to be looked at as a broader issue as well. So looking at how to prevent, and we have engaged in prevention measures in one way or the other. The World Health Organization recommends efforts to tackle violence against children should systematically address risk and protective factors at 4 levels. And I think one of the speakers also talked about this. We need to look at the individual child. What would make one child more prone to a certain type of violence than another? Could it be lack of parental care? Could it be because they are orphans? Could it be because they're in the wrong place? We also look at the community. How does the community treat children? What are the community values in a given place? We also look at the society at large. So effective strategies will need to address multiple root causes. Look at all the possible root causes as you try to have preventative strategies. There's also the need to enhance positive and nurturing parent-child relationships. The parent is the first person who really needs to protect the child. The family should be the first place where the child receives protection. If protection is missing at home, even out there, the children will be exposed. And that is why neglect really is a big contributor of child violence against children, because first line of defense. We also need to look at law enforcement, and with all its challenges, it needs to be complemented by long-term societal changes in attitudes and practices by tackling social and economic factors. And I talked about the cultural factors, the violence that will be perpetrated in the name of the culture. This is how we do it. This is how we've done it. Our grandmothers also did it. We also need to look at the economic factors as well. So community programs such as education and awareness on impact of violence against children on the individual, community, and the whole society, bystander intervention, and as well as economic strengthening programs. A wider public health approach is needed as it aims to create an environment where all citizens are safe and healthy. This is where, nobody is safe unless all of the people in the society are safe. So if children are not safe, then the rest of us are also not safe. If women are not safe, then the rest of us are also not safe. So that is important. We also, our forum today is really on our role as religious communities, faith communities. And so we also look at the role of religious leaders. And they have a big role and they have a big impact. So the role of religious leaders in influencing societal change cannot be overemphasized. They already play a big role in the society, especially in relation to preserving traditions, culture, and values and morality. Indeed, faith leaders are in a position of power when it comes to influencing norms and practices on the ground in their communities and often act as gatekeepers. When the bishops talk, when SUPKEM talks, when religious leaders talk, we listen. And we often look up to them to give us guidance on issues that are constantly emerging. So even on this issue of child protection, we really would benefit a lot from their leadership. We listen to them, and so this is an opportunity. In addition, faith leaders can contribute serving as advocates at many levels in the society. But what has worked so far? We have a very extensive legal framework in Kenya, and we start with the Constitution, which for the first time recognized children as a category that needed attention. And it expressly prohibits abuse and violence against children. I just want to quickly mention them. The Children's Act, and very soon, if the bill is enacted, we'll have a new act that is quite comprehensive, that is quite also useful in terms of how we protect children. The Penal Code provides punishment against crimes committed against children. We have the Protection Against Domestic Violence Act, which was enacted as a result or to ensure that children and families are protected. Like I said before, domestic violence was treated as an internal matter. Nobody wanted to intervene. And so this act really came in handy, and now we are able to prosecute violence that happens at the family level. Sexual Offences Act has also been very instrumental, although it has the tendency to discriminate against the boy child, who often in a lot of sexual offenses will be the one punished when it is a sexual allegation. At the policy level, the government has really enacted, or rather has really put in place a lot of policies and programs. The National Children Policy of 2010, the National Policy for the Eradication of Female Genital Mutilation of 2019, so very recent. The National Plan of Action for Children in Kenya, 2015 to 2022, and there's one for for violence against, then another National Action Plan for Children in Kenya for 2019 to 2023. So these are in place, and therefore we don't have a deficit of laws and policies. I think we have enough. We only need to work and ensure the gaps that they have, because they have gaps, are filled, and we'll be able to do much more. So the legal and policy framework has improved and is progressive, although enforcement is beset by resource and other challenges. Resource allocation has been a challenge. So resource allocation has been a challenge, and I'm sure for those who have done response in child protection cases, sometimes you go to the police station, or they don't have a car, they don't have fuel. You go to the children's department, they don't have a social worker, or they don't, they are not really able to assist because they have limitations in terms of resources. Also, in terms of the laws, we have certain gaps that need to be addressed. And if the children's bill is enacted, at least will be somewhere, towards getting that rectified. But there's more also to be done. So enforcement of the laws and government policies, like I mentioned, there are resource challenges that hinder this. There's also sometimes the inability of those tasked with doing this, doing it properly. For various reasons. Sometimes it's motivation, sometimes for other reasons. We also have gaps in terms of public and community education. We cannot assume that people know what the law says or what the law provides. There's need for community education, like the UNICEF KTN partnership that I talked about. There's need to educate people more. There's need to talk about this more. And also this would allow actually a dialogue within the communities on this issue. Because a lot of times, and I think in a lot of communities, sexual violence is not addressed because sexual matters are a taboo. We don't talk about them, but they are affecting our children. It's happening in our households. So we need to have community education to encourage response to sexual violence and other types of violence. We need to encourage the public to obey the law so that they also help the law enforcement. If cases are not reported, for example, then the law enforcement is not likely to come in. So public and community education is very, very key in prevention. Response and support services, again, challenges in terms of resources available in this. I think we can do more with child protection centers that are equipped with counseling services, medical services, and all other kinds of support that an abused child. In a lot of cases, these support services are provided by non-governmental organizations as well as some of the faith-based organizations. I think this is an area that can be supported more because we need a lot more services down in the communities so that children can quickly be supported and helped as well as treated, and then also that will encourage law enforcement also to take up their roles. Greater involvement of community-based actors, including religious leaders. The government can't do this alone, and non-governmental actors cannot do this alone. Faith communities, the churches, the mosques, the Hindus, and all the other religious communities that we have in the country reach each and every child because they are made of children and families. So involving them actually increases the reach of child protection services. So it is important to include religious leaders so that in turn then they are able to include their communities in this kind of work. So some recommendations. Faith communities are guided by compassion and motivation to serve those that are marginalized. And the scripture tells us this. The potential for faith communities to engage in child protection is great due to long history of engagement and large presence within health and educational facilities and the trust that most faith leaders enjoy in communities. Faith communities run a lot of health centers, hospitals, schools, you name it. And therefore, because of this large presence, then they have an opportunity to engage in child protection in a wholesome way, reaching a lot of children. Again, even when you think about the remotest place in the country, you'll find a religious community there. You'll find a religious leader there. So we are well, dispersed in the country to be able to engage in this. Then I think as religious communities and faith leaders, we have an opportunity to participate in technical working groups at the national level to promote child protection issues in the country. When you think about it, all the laws in this country will have to go through a certain public participation process. There are discussions, this memoranda that is presented, there are debates, and there are so many opportunities that we can engage in to ensure that child protection issues are captured in the laws. We're not saying that the religious leaders go to do that, but within within the faith communities, they have professionals that can actually, on their behalf, be able to do this. And I think we have seen this with a lot of bills, with the Constitution and other issues that have concerned the faith communities. So this is also an area that the faith community can engage in. Advocacy at the national level with policymakers, raising the profile of violence against children as an issue of national importance. Our members of parliament, our MCAs, and all our leaders really need to be engaged as they plan for other things. They also need to plan how to address child protection issues from the national level, because from the national level then we get commitment, and we also get funding and budgeting that is done, that is adequately done to address child protection. Of course, the Department for Children's Services has tried; it has done its part, but we cannot have, we need more. The department needs to be supported more. And as long as we are able to have this as a national debate, we are able to sustain this at the national level, we are then going to have a decreased number of children suffering violence, because it means then there's more work, there's more attention on the issue. We also need faith-based partnerships at all levels, so we can engage at the national, county, sub-county, and village levels to collectively provide leadership to the society on eradication of violence against children, negative cultural norms and practices, given the, you know, the status that faith leaders have. Provide leadership on generating understanding of the causes and impact of violence in the society. Because again, as a society, we need to understand that this is not, violence against children is not just a small matter. It affects this child and affects the community as well, and the society at large. So we need to understand this, and we need leadership on this. We need more debates, we need more research coming out, you know, addressing these issues. We need to look at the children, for example, in the criminal justice system. We need to understand how they got to be where they are. Because research, like I said before, has shown that a lot of the people in prison today and in correctional facilities have had childhood violence, or they have experienced childhood violence. So we also need to understand. Let's not talk about research from the US. Can we have research done here in Kenya, done by us people, so that we understand better the various impacts of violence on, you know, on the society. The religious leaders and faith communities can provide platforms for public and community education and dialogues on violence against children, cultural norms and practices. And I'm happy that I believe that was Reverend Canon Chris Kinyaji talked about programs that they have on parenting, programs that they have on various groups in the church. And I think this is very important. We need to bring it down to the various groups we have in the faith communities, the various groups that we engage with in the society. And so we also think about platforms like our worship services, our media stations. A lot of faith communities have media stations, either radio or TV, newspapers and magazines. All those are platforms that could be very useful in highlighting the issue of violence against children. We could also embed provision of prevention and response services in already existing service network of faith-based schools, health institutions, and community centers. We have schools, we have hospitals, we have community centers. This could also have an added mandate or an aspect that addresses violence against children in the given community. We could also harness technology to engage the society on issues of violence against children. We have all, I think, a lot of faith communities are also on social media. They're also on other platforms. Technology, it's here with us. We need to harness it to reach as many people as possible, challenging this issue of violence against children. We also need to engage more on advocacy for the welfare and protection of the child with attention to the boy child. I think I talked about it earlier, that there's a little neglect towards the boy child, especially when it comes to issues of sexual violence. We really need to give them attention so that they also can equitably enjoy protection with girls. Promotion of justice to victims by supporting formal justice processes as opposed to resolving violence against children informally through village elders or similar forums. This is for the reason that we tend, in a lot of cases, to settle things in the family at the household level, which is okay. But when there's injury, when there's serious violence against a child, it's criminal already, and that should be a matter for the law enforcement. So we could help a lot by ensuring justice is done by following the formal processes when this kind of issue arises. It also helps to deter perpetrators from continuing in this. The moment we talk at home and we agree, we discuss, we agree, and we finish that matter, we are telling these people that you can go on. And chances are they will abuse one other child or even more. So it's very important that the formal processes are followed where this injury or where this sexual violence. Promote a positive parenting approach, as parenting is a major factor in child protection. I think several speakers have already talked about this. It's very important that parents are enabled to protect children. Let's think of those young mothers, those young boys becoming fathers as well. Let's help all the members of the society become better parents. The family is the first line of defense. If children are safe at home, if they are protected at home, they are likely to be protected elsewhere. So this is a concept that is evolving, and there's a lot of work going on in it. I think UNICEF is also leading in it. And I think faith communities have a lot of, would have a lot of expertise. I mean, they deal with a lot of issues that we take to them on a daily basis. So they would be very, I think it would be very useful if they were to engage in developing this concept of positive parenting and actually having it taken down to the individual small communities down there, like we say in Kenya, to the ground, so that we develop better parent-child relationships and strong society from the ground going up. So for non-state actors, they've done a lot. They continue doing a lot. And a recommendation is that they should continue advocacy at the national and county levels that like they have been doing. They should continue supporting and giving expertise to the state, county governments, and religious leaders in violence against children prevention and response. They have a lot of expertise, and this is useful. They continue, or they should continue with strategic interventions and services to children and communities. Strategic interventions, like you will find an organization focusing on commercial sexual exploitation of children in Mombasa. Another organization is working on eradicating child labor. So those are strategic, and they are very useful, and they can continue. I want to jump to recommendations for county governments. Now with devolution, we have many levels at which we can operate and we can engage. And county governments also need to allocate resources for local prevention and response to violence against children. They are closer to the people, and in their violence against children should waver in delivery of public and community education on violence against children. The more actors we have engaging in public and community education, the better we'll be able to do it. Collaboration or many actors coming up to engage in this will ensure that we reach as many people as possible. They could also continue coordinating violence against children, prevention and response in the counties, meaning that they understand the issues affecting children in their own counties, so they should be able to coordinate action on the ground. We have two examples of good practices that have been implemented elsewhere, and I'll just quickly go through them. And these good practices are actually projects that have been implemented by faith communities and faith leaders. And one is called SASA Faith, and it is a project developed in partnership with Trocare. I am not able to pronounce it the proper way, but it has another pronunciation, but Trocare. It is an adaptation of the SASA, another program that has been targeting or working on preventing violence against children. So SASA Faith has been adapted from that, and it is being currently used across the Horn of Africa, East and Southern Africa. And it adapts it has been adapted for use by religious communities. And what it does is that it has a guide that has staff guidance and materials to be used in the faith community, a training manual, and faith team and network for each phase of implementation, and assessment tools to learn from programming. So it has a lot of materials that helps those who are implementing child protection, to do it in a systematic manner and in a way that it is effective. So it's like a resource kit, and it has been implemented and it has been successful. We have another case, or rather another good practice, and it is called Peace, Love and Tolerance. This is a project implemented in Egypt. It is a collaboration between UNICEF Egypt, the Muslim community and the Christian community in Egypt. And they came together to develop 3 publications, so three books concerning ending violence against children. One from the perspective of the Holy Bible, one from the perspective of the Quran, or the Holy Quran. And like we heard from Mr. Hassan Olenando, the Quran really has a lot of wisdom and has a lot of guidance on the issue of child protection. So they developed one book from the perspective of the Bible, and another one from the Holy Quran, and another as a joint publication. All these were meant to really engage the faith community in Egypt, and they are based on 3 common pillars of peace, love, and tolerance. The main goal of the publications is to prevent violence inside families, schools, and social circles. So targeting these 3 institutions, as that is where a lot of violence is happening. The project highlights that faith leaders alone will not change social norms. They need the members of the larger society to engage. And then it equipped them to work collaboratively alongside parents, teachers, and educational institutions. So, working with all these other actors, parents, teachers, and education institutions, helped the faith leaders to do a lot of work, towards ending violence against children in Egypt. And it was quite successful. So that is where I want to stop. And I think what we carry from this is that violence against children has persisted, it has been going on, and it has to come to an end. And I think this is the right time to say that this needs to come to an end. It cannot continue. At least now we know, at least now we are engaged, and now the next thing is to take the necessary steps. And I want to thank you very much for your audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Idris. You have actually declared justice in that whatever you have done, it is full of insights. And I'm sure you're going to get more detailed presentations, maybe through whatever you have given, through maybe what is going to be presented to the table there, and especially the table compile them. Now the next stage, I think we stand slightly because I see some of us, we are a bit tired before we go to the next stage. So please, we stand. Yes. And you lift up your 2 hands. You stretch. And then down. Down means down. Yes, apart from the MC. Then up. Your hands up. Down. Now you can sit. And let us now give a clap to our first presenter. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Now our next presenter is Rose Obonyo, who is going to take us through KCCB model on child protection. Watoto watunzwe, wajitunze na watunzane program. Rose is a trained paralegal working with the Catholic Diocese of Kitale, and she works in the Office of Child Protection. So Rose, welcome and take us through that topic.
Our organizer, Kenya Conference Catholics of Bishops, World Bishop Kenya, CCK, all our guest speakers, all my brothers and sisters who are here today to put our effort together to make sure violence against children is possible for us. On watoto watunzwe, wajitunze na watunzane. IT, kindly. So children are valued as to care and protect for them in line with the call of Jesus in scriptures. Let the children come to me. Matthew and Luke tells us all the information on children, the word Jesus himself spoke on children. The church has increasingly become aware of the privileged violation of children's rights in almost every space in the world. In recognition of the many forms and extent of violence experienced by girls and boys in Kenya, not discriminating children with a special need, the Catholic Church developed a safeguarding policy and procedure for the personnel working within all Catholic dioceses and Catholic institutions in Kenya to create and sustain a culture of safety for children. The church further commits to working in partnership with the civil authorities to ensure that all aspects of child welfare are addressed promptly, professionally, and justly. The Catholic Church owns and sponsors about 30% primary schools of the basic learning institutions in Kenya. Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops began implementing the Child Safety and Protection Program in 2012. That targeted all Catholic-sponsored schools within the 25 dioceses within 47 counties in Kenya. The goal of the program was to sensitize, train, and mobilize primary education stakeholders about their roles and responsibilities in protecting primary school children against all forms of abuse. Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops determined that all the school community members, including parents, must work together in different roles to provide a conducive school environment for effective teaching and learning to happen. The main challenges includes inadequate material for training and sensitizing of targeted groups, inadequate networks and collaboration, and technical skills relating to child protection and monitoring and evaluation for key resource people. In 2015, Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops did survey, and the survey came out like this. This was commissioned in May 2015, and its finding indicated that 8 out of every 10 children were survivors of verbal and physical abuse, and 3 out of every 10 children had suffered from sexual harassment and abuse. We all know, as Beatrice has just said, if there is a case of sexual harassment, then the law needs you to prove without reasonable doubt. So many cases on sexual harassment go unaddressed, and we'd like our government to look at the gaps that we have in our policies so that children can be able to access this legal without looking into those gaps. They should be filled and assist the children to get at least justice whenever they are supposed to get. The home was identified to be the most unsafe place for children. All the speakers who have been here have spoken about school being a safe place for children. We are also saying that schools are the safe place for children, but it is opposite, because these children were brought out from this home. That is the beginning of their school, and now they are becoming dangerous for these children. So it is my prayer that at the end of this conference, we should be able to assist these children to get safety in their homes. The courses included interrogation of moral values in society, fluid family setups, and orphan childhood domestic violence, alcohol abuse, poverty, negative traditional culture practices, some religious practices, lack of awareness on social safety networks, and corporal punishment. I think even in school, the law says there's no corporal punishment, but when we move into our schools, we still find children are being punished. Sometimes you enter into a class, maybe you have gone, like, for example, Catholic-sponsored school, you go to visit the school and see what is going on as child protection officer. You will see a stick at the corner, and when you ask the teacher, he will tell you that is a pointer. So after it has pointed, it will again land on the child. So let's look at our baseline study. 2015 is continuing. The recommendation from the study identified possible interventions such as: 1, guidance and counseling should be enhanced, building children and parents' capacities, better structures, and working with the law enforcement. This called for rebranding of the program to Watoto Watunzwe program. Watoto Watunzwe na Watunzane program, the goal is to improve attitude and actions towards protecting of children by all members of the society. All of us are responsible for protection of children, including children themselves. Guiding principles are the Catholic social teachings, values, and children's participation, as well as aligning with national and Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops' policies and priorities. Watoto Watunzwe program theory of change is that enhancing awareness and capacities of Catholic Church representatives, teachers, parents, children, and local transport communities. When we talk about local transport communities, we are talking about border borders who ferry our children from home to school, from school to home. In between, whatever happens, God knows. We are also looking at strengthening linkages and networks between the Catholic Church and state and non-state actors. Will promote the dignity, safety, and protection of children within the family, schools, and community. The theory of change acknowledges that knowledge and skills should be reinforced to strengthen care practices to ensure that homes, schools, and communities are safe places for both girls and boys. Positive attitudes towards girls and boys needs to be embraced by all. In that, when we look at our families, let's take, for example, at home, you find a boy was playing and he falls down. You will tell that boy, stand up, you are a man, don't worry, you are a man, stand up and go on with what you are doing. But let the girl fall down. You will start calling her those sweet words, encouraging her, giving her hope, but not a boy. So we are saying that let's create safe environment for both children, not discriminating boys and girls. This program phase was implemented in 2 Catholic dioceses of Malindi and Kitale. It was a pilot project. Within 2 parishes of each diocese, thus 4 parishes adopting a whole community approach. Beneficiaries: 19 primary schools, learners were 22,373. Adults reached from community members were 40,090. Kenya key actors includes 19 trainers, 80 key conduct teachers, 200 parish child protection actors, and 171 school safeguarding committee members. These safeguarding committee members are member of board of management. So the next is approachable structures that we used, and that one you can read for yourself so that we can check on our time. We continue. Look at the strategy for yourself. It is on the screen. So we also came out with the results on the finding we have done. Watoto Watunzwe program schools have become child-friendly schools. And you will find those neighboring schools that are not implementing this program, removing their children from, parents are removing children from those neighbor schools to come and learn in these child-friendly schools. And if you talk to the head teacher, they will tell you the population is very high because of Watoto Watunzwe program. Improved self-awareness, self-confidence, and self-esteem of children. We have seen children, when there is a case of child abuse and they come, they want to access legal procedure, they are able to write statements without fear. They are able to talk in court without fear. So this program has really assisted to improve self-esteem of children. It has also improved attitudes and norms among community members on protecting children. There were parents who did not care about their children. Whether they had meals or not, they did not care. But because of this program and awareness which was carried out within the community members, now they are able to take up their responsibility. For example, whenever they used to be called for parents' meeting in schools, they were not coming. But after this program, you find 100% attendance of parents attending meetings when they are called by the head teacher. Parents are more involved in the well-being, protecting, and care of their children. They are concerned, not even their own children. They are also assisting those neighbors that do not have children in these schools to take care of their children. They tell them the importance of protecting their children. So we see good results on this program. Improved enrollment and involvement of learners in WWP schools. I have said about that many parents are moving children from the schools that are not implementing, bringing them to schools that are implementing WWP program. Sensitization of parents and learners at school level. Use of Radio Mitume in Kitale for awareness and knowledge creation. We have a program on Radio Mitume whereby the key conduct teachers use the material they were given to teach children following topics as they were ranked, and children listen, ask questions, and they enjoy the topics because they even don't see the person who is talking, but they can hear from the radio. Sometimes they don't imagine that presenter is from Kitale. They think the presenter is from Nairobi. So they are very much attentive to learn and understand what is going on. So we also have some challenges. Other achievement, you can continue. We have some challenges here. These challenges are to refer reallocation of key conduct teachers. They are transferred. After 1 year, they are moved from one school to another. And yet they have gained a lot of knowledge and skills on child protection. So it is a challenge on our side. The pool of TOT and KCT, that is trainers and key conduct teachers, is not sustainable as they are volunteers. You know, you are given work to do, you volunteer, but for how long are you going to volunteer? After some time, you feel you can do your work, you don't want to volunteer anymore. So it is also a challenge on our side that we still pray that our good Lord will help us so that they get something to make them sustain being our TOTs and key conduct teachers. The use of the Catholic affiliated rescue centers in Malindi provided environment, good environment to rescue survivors or victims of children who have been sexually abused. I have an example of a child who was trafficked from Kitale to Malindi. Then that boy had married that girl of 13 years, but when she became pregnant, the boy was also still young. He started noticing drama, then he ran away when that girl was almost to give birth. So the girl was left on her own, but through our rescue center in Malindi, they managed to rescue this girl, assisted her when she gave birth. Through our collaboration and networks, we had to bring back this girl to Kitale, and she's now safe. We are taking care of her. So the rescue center in Malindi Diocese is doing good job, and we pray that many other centers should be opened so that children can be safe wherever they are. Our key learnings: 1, collaboration of state and non-state actors and communities has been effective in strengthening capacity and expertise. The collaboration has reduced costs and increased acceptability and buy-in. What does that mean? It means that the community have now owned the program, wherever they are, without even their key conduct teachers, even other teachers who are not key conduct teachers, they can assist a child when the key conduct teachers are not there. Parents have been taught with the trainers in the community. They are now able to take up their responsibility well, as I said, and they have owned the program, and wherever you go in those schools, in those communities, you will hear watoto watunzwe, watunzane na wajitunze. 2, church-wide sensitizations through the small Christian community, church events through formal groups and catechism classes resulted to wider reach. Communication on this program has trickled down because of all these groups. Whenever they are, they talk of watoto watunzwe, watunzane na wajitunze. You can even see the slogan itself. Even that mama who is selling sukuma, if she hear the language, mtoto atunzwe, she knows that there should be something to be done to this child. So it is very important for us to use that so that all people can be involved. Inadequate capacity in monitoring and evaluation and project management is threat to effective achievement of results. Without enough resources, you may want to do more, but you are limited. Integration of men and boys in safeguarding and critical stakeholders in promoting safety of children is also something that has assisted us to learn to improve on that. The need to consider sustainability in future programming, especially how to the safeguarding culture can remain in this institution. We should also learn how this culture of watoto watunzwe should not come out in the institution and in the community, because they have embraced it and it is their baby and the baby is growing. If you give birth to a baby and the baby is growing, you feel great. So they are also feeling great because this baby is growing and growing very fast. Addressing push and pull factors is critical for the success of child safeguarding. Intervention, awareness, and knowledge is important, but more needs to be done for behavior change. When we talk about behavior change, we still think about our cultures. What does our culture say when it comes to a boy or a girl? A boy is supposed to behave like a man. Even if his heart is a man, he has to be strong. A girl should be bembelezed. That is a baby always. So let's also remove that culture. And our children also learn from our parents. If a man is beaten by the wife, he will say aliangushwa na boda boda. He will not go and report. So our boys also learn from there to be strong, not to speak about the abuse that are going through. We should empower them to talk about what is happening, not cheating that boda boda ilikuwa. Just be open and say, bibi yangu alinipiga ngumi, ndio maana kichwa imefura. So we have volunteerism is a good approach that should be sustained beyond the program. institutionalization of networks, partnership, and safeguarding responsibilities at national and regional level institutions, having child protection policies in all schools, training key conduct teachers and board of management members, in addition to having a child protection conduct person in the church group. That is also another learning lesson. Moving forward, we can continue with the collaboration effort that engage the beneficiaries, various stakeholders, and child protection actors of both dioceses in deepening understanding of different contexts in which abuse still occur and practical strategies to stem the privileging high child abuse levels. B, strengthen psychoeducation and psychosocial support to child survivors of abuse. Give significant attention to financial literacy skills building for parents, caregivers, to improve their livelihood and reduce poverty level of the targeted beneficiaries. Many children who have been abused, if you talk to them, they will tell you that it is because of the poverty line that the parents are having. I had a case of a girl of standard 6 who was made pregnant by a shopkeeper. And when I was talking to her, she told me through counseling, she told me that she had missed kangumu and soda. And she told the parents to buy for her kangumu and soda, and the parents could not meet her needs. So the shopkeeper offered to give her kangumu and soda free, but later he requested the girl to go and take kangumu and soda in his house. So that is how the pregnancy was found. So we find that poverty level is also a contributing factor to these child abuse cases. With those few remarks, that is the representation of the WWP program for Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops. We are all called upon to end violence on children through watoto, watunzwe, wajitunze, na watunzane. May God bless you.
Thank you very much, Rose Obonyo, for taking us through the KCCB model on child protection. At this juncture, I would like to invite the last part of this half day, morning day, half session. I would like to invite Most Reverend Anthony Muheria, the Archbishop of the Catholic Diocese of Nyeri, the Chairman of Interfaith Task Force on COVID-19, who is going to take us through the impact of COVID-19 on families and child well-being. Karibu. Tumkaribishe kwa makofi.
Distinguished guests, stakeholders in the care for children, our hosts, the interreligious bodies who have organized this conference, from NCCK, World Vision, SUPCAM, KCCB, ladies and gentlemen, I know I have gotten now the graveyard shift, it's called, when people are hungry and tired, but I plead with you to just hang in there. I warn I may have to call out the ones who are dozing, so please keep awake and let's walk together. The good thing is that what I'm going to present has already been presented in one or another by all those who've spoken this morning. And because at the end of all their presentations, they refer to this difficult time that we have had. So I'm glad to participate in this interreligious conference to discuss such a critical aspect of the safety of children. It has been proposed to me to discuss and talk about the impact of COVID-19 on families and children, or the children well-being. The dynamics and intricacies of COVID-19 disease are still being unraveled. We really did not know enough about the medical and the biological aspects of the virus and how it mutates. It's been a learning curve after groping in the darkness as the new symptoms or medical reactions arose. If the medical world itself was not prepared for health consequences of COVID-19 and its heinous mutation, diversity of effects on health, less so are we prepared for the devastating effects it would cause in the family. And here I would pause a bit before presenting to you, and that's what I will try to do more briefly because of the time and also because of our state. But before going to the 10 points that I want to present to you today, I think it's good that I mention two things. The first, understanding violence. What is violence? Whenever we're speaking about violence, and we are highlighting three major aspects, of course, but I think we should be a little wider when we are approaching the violating young people, violating children. What does that mean? I would want to just comment first is actions that are against, first, they should be our point of departure, the human dignity of that child for just being a human person, irrespective of whether they are mature, young, of whatever age, irrespective of whether they are special needs, irrespective of whether they are boy or girl, that inherent, and I think speakers before me said that, inherent human dignity that must be enshrined, defended, proclaimed, not because they are defended by the law, not because the law stipulates, but rather the law stipulates trying to somehow capture that reality. Second, those are the actions which, besides being against the human dignity of that child, many times are actions against their will. First, because they don't give their will, or second, and still so, because they cannot give their will at that age. They're not able to consent because they're not able to understand. Will comes after understanding. And the third, it also is actions against their childhood. A child does not only have rights, in fact we speak about rights, but rather a child is a child. And all what a child entails should not be deprived of that child. So it also goes beyond just the abuse. It is when you no longer give the space for the child to be a child. That is violating the child. Finally, against the good. The good that that child will be doing. If you do not give the child the chance to obtain a good that they ought to obtain, not necessarily have a right, then you are violating that child. So it's good to have a wider discussion of violence so as not to reduce ourselves too much to actions which are criminal actions against the child. Those come when we have already eroded the first actions. The second consideration I want to make again is that constrictions, and this is in the context now of COVID, constrictions or certain situations that bring about stress, call them stress situations, distort hearts, distorts the human heart, distorts the capacity that we have of doing what is right, or of willing, or of control, and therefore warping the way we apply that knowledge or our action. In other words, what should be connatural to us is distorted. Stress, constrictions, and restrictions. Where you have been constrained to a little room, you find yourself suddenly becoming agitated. And this anxiety can lead you to just about anything that you not have thought about. So it is in this context, therefore, that if we look at what happened to the COVID-19, we're able to draw out and see how this very adversely affected our children and our families. I'll try to present these 10 points rather quickly with just brief comments in the little time that we would want to give this moment. First, the lockdown effect. This has already been addressed by various speakers. This constrained the immense energy of the little ones. They were unable to do what they as children should. And that restriction necessarily brings about mischief because they have a lot of energy. And that mischief creates the space for correction in inverted commas, or restraining, or constraining, so that, and sometimes that has been done wrongly. So this initial restriction and the fear that we have to keep them indoors, especially after the first moment of lockdown, and the long periods in these limited spaces have made these people, it's like winding a clock and unable, and the moment you let it, it just spins. So in a sense, we have a lot of painted energies, desires that these kids ordinarily as children ought to have. And at times this lockdown did not give them safe places, safe connections, relations. This would affect more adversely the elder siblings. These are the youth over 15. And then that restriction, especially to the older ones, which I'll speak a little after, then played out into they themselves being the perpetrators of violence to their younger ones, perpetrators of what would maybe start as play, as entertainment, as engagement, but oftentimes like a bad game which starts with a, I believe you all did that when you were young, the slapping of the hands. I don't know what the game is, which you put your hands out and I slap and see how many can tap. Eventually that can become very violent. Eventually it can end up in a fight. This kind of play, things that you think are engaging, can deteriorate. The lockdown effect also, and I'll put it now a bit longer than just lockdown, the closing of the schools, the long period of closure. In some of the communities especially, was disastrous. I know in my own jurisdiction of Nyeri and Laikipia, in the areas of Dol and the areas where you had the more nomadic communities, we are struggling to get the girls back to school because it was too long, and therefore it was very easy for them to actually get married off. And that's it. And that's it. The same thing with what has been mentioned here of FGM. So the long lockdown was a recipe for, or a culture for actions because of restriction and anxiety caused, and as well long period whereby a lot of our children suffered tremendously. The second one is idleness and exposure to immoral and violent entertainment. COVID-19 and the consequences that came of restriction of movements, and especially the children being in in our homes, the seeking of entertainment for fun at first, it is very difficult to fill 12 hours in a day with healthy fun unless you are very innovative. And I think here as faith communities, a lot of us did fail because we did not actually innovate enough to engage the young people when they were there. Innovate enough here, I comment at the side, means getting into the internet, getting into the digital world and engaging them even though they are not physically engaged in ways that they keep away from the other, which are luring and seducing avenues of engagement called entertainment, but they are a camouflaged trap for many of this. So in this environment, then you had immoral fun and abusive fun. What do I mean? It's not only about the immoral in terms of the sexually explicit and pornographic entertainment they had. Some of this entertainment for the middle class was games, TV or video games. Now, I don't know if you know that at least 80 to 90% of the video games are violent. 80 to 90% of the popular video games are violent. It's about getting out by killing, by fighting, by shooting, and that goes into their psyche. And as mentioned here, that exposure, constant exposure to this, creates in them some kind of agitation and desire to enact what they have been seeing for 8 hours in a day. Add on to that the entertainment of the videos on Netflix, or add to that a lot of other things which are immoral. This then led to a higher tendency to enact what they were living in their virtual engagement. So you had older youth who sometimes drew aspiration or inspiration from these power play and provocation, violent entertainment, and then try to enact it on their siblings. This is a reality too. If you remember, at one stage, the wrestling was very popular, and if you lived around that time when the good wrestling, not this one which is so vicious, it's still the same. But the kids would reenact the wrestling in the schools, you know. They would try to wrestle one another, and at times it can get a little nasty. That was this make-believe play can actually lead some of these kids to do tremendous things. Don't forget, we have had suicides of kids less than 11 years in this period. It's because they have watched suicide in a movie, and then they try to enact it. That, of course, is a double abuse. It is you have put a seed in a child, and that seed has sprouted to self-rejection because the mother told her, don't eat the banana now, for example. And that ends to reenact what they saw as a rebellion or as a way of defiance that they saw in a movie, which is take your life. So we must see the cause also in these forms of entertainment that idleness created. And we, now here as we discuss, as we want to defend these young children, we must also see it's not just about regulation or statutes. It's about creating new ways, being innovative so as not to come to solve a problem by firefighting, but to cut it in the bud, in the way of not creating the situations. So these children then become both victims and perpetrators. The third, the close proximity interaction across ages. For the first time during this lockdown, we had university students, tertiary students, secondary students, primary students, all at home at the same time. Of course, they are all members of the same family. But the interaction during the day is this interage interaction. The very young children have been exposed to adult topics and adult behavior, material, environment. That means both immoral. And sometimes these kids, especially they stand 6s, 7s, and 8s, want to pretend to be older. They're just about coming into adolescence. And they feel like they are already. So they start acting. And they become ready prey for the older siblings or the older, younger generation. Because they pretend to be nice looking, or they pretend, the boys, to be already nice and strong. Yet they are just in that age. So in hanging around this other older generation, being very vulnerable because they do not have the defense systems and ways and experience, they become very ready prey for all kinds of abuses, the whole range of abuses. The older people also in this, tending to abuse them, let out some of their own frustration on these kids, both boys and girls. They let out because there's this idea which we have to address, which is power. The whole idea of abuse and violence is imposing and feeling you are in a position of power, and you misuse and abuse that position to one who is less powerful. That's abuse. That's the violence that we are going to call, we have seen caused to these little ones. So because there is this misconception of control and power, some of these young adults or this younger generation who are a bit older have tried to control, and sometimes, of course, in this process, abuse in many ways, beyond physical, more so in moral, emotional, in bringing down their self-esteem of the little ones, in trying to come up as top dog. The fourth is scarcity and domestic violence. The scarcity of resources and food during the first 6 months of COVID was a very serious trigger to violent exchanges of parents in families, which these children witnessed. But it was also a trigger that the domestic wrangles between parents would also spill over to the children. This is a reality we've seen, especially the physical, and also the abuse that comes more by words and by insults and those kind of abuses. This domestic violence, as was said before without going into details, often changes, mutates into abuse of children, and especially sexual harassment in the families. Because it is always a fight of power. Of course, we are always put in many times the perpetrator to be the male figure, the father of the family. But it's not always so. It's not always that the perpetrator of violence will be the father figure of that family. Of course, if you think about the sexual violence, a lot of the times that is the case. But I have seen the cases where the violence that follows is from the mother, frustrated without a way to get out, and somehow pours her frustrations on the children in violent ways, sometimes very, very violent ways. The case I have in point is where the mother burnt her children as punishment. Now that, even for a mother, is terrible. So let us understand, even in those circumstances, how do you address that? Of course, we come in as faith communities to see how close are we with the families that are having domestic violence in their families. Have we got Have we set up ways, places, how to reach out, if you may call it, the apostolate? I use that word, but we can use a wider word, the witness or the ministry of domestic violence, where we address domestic violence in a strategic way, because that is where, again, a lot of this other violence against children is born. Number 5, absence of mentorship and oversight of adults. Here already was mentioned that parents have become very accustomed to abrogate their role as the first educators of their children. And here is maybe one to do that we must regain. Have we been having enough interaction with parents so as to know and make them aware of their big role as mentors for these young ones? This period of COVID, the long period at home, without supervision over the activities, these young people grew wild. And this is also the children. And it's because the parents oftentimes were not able to give and are not accustomed to supervise their children. They only have 1 month. This time they had 9 months. So they got tired and they didn't know how to do it. So the usual mentorship that the children received regularly from schools was lacking. What was often a controlled atmosphere was the attitude, where the attitude and value system is given to them in our institutions. Here depended on the strongest member of that, let us use this word, pack of young people. I have witnessed the packs of young people, where you can see the university followed by the young secondary schools, and in tow you have the little fellows, and you see them loitering around the village. I saw them. That's the kind of idea I'm saying, a pack. And the most vulnerable in that pack is always the little ones, because they're just following and they are totally at the mercy of the older ones. And even if a brother is in that pack who may defend, or a sister, oftentimes that defense may not be effective. So the mentorship is something we must rediscover for parents and even for our communities, our faith communities. We are supposed to be the network, the safety net of the young people. We must first be the safety net of the little ones. 6, drug use among the older youth. In our diocese, we have decided to address the issue, especially of mental health, in our institutions, together with our KCCB Department of Education, and trying to speak to go to each institution. We've gone already to about perhaps 70 to 80 secondary schools for mentorship, for listening, counseling, listening to their problems, and maybe another 20 primary schools. What's come out, surprises, is amongst the many things that we mentioned before, is the use of drugs. That the drug peddlers somehow had a field day during COVID. A lot of our kids were introduced to drugs. And they are coming out now trying to get out of it. And thanks to God, we are having good progress. But I think it's not only the secondaries, schools, stand 7s, stand 6, those are maybe 13, 12-year-olds who have been introduced by their siblings, by the older ones, in this pretense to become older. This is one of the abuses as well, which we must see how do we address. The drug use in our communities. The peddlers are in our communities. And we, as religious leaders, must see how we can work with the Ministry of Interior, amongst ourselves, with other community organs, in order to address the issue of drugs, because the drugs are directly related to violence. Drugs go together with violence, either as an immediate or as a consequence of it. The victims were often these young children in taking and in the fight or the violence that was meted out by these who were using these drugs. This, I think, is another area we must awaken. The number 7, less mentioned, overwhelmed domestic helps. The long school break gave way to a new problem. Middle-class families who have domestic helps in their homes experienced overstressed domestic helps. They are not used to handling the whole family. They are not used to checking, being, besides cooking and housekeeping, being the overseers of the life in the family. And I think it's something that I hope the researchers can look into. But I have evidence of several domestic helps, even in those difficult economic times, who left their job. And they left their job because they can't cope. In this stress of the domestic help, they were one of the causes or one of the avenues of violence in families, especially with the little ones. Overstressed domestic help is a trigger to terrible violence to children even under 1 year. I just challenge you to search a few of those clips that you can find easily on YouTube, but they can be pretty discouraging and devastating. In the same way that the wonderful domestic helps can be the blessing of the family. Unfortunately, we pay very little attention to the support, to the mentorship of the domestic help. We do not think about the domestic help as a co-educator. We want to ask to take them as servants, sometimes almost slaves. We want the least paid and therefore the least experienced and the least knowledgeable. Then we get the consequences. And this was one of the consequences in this moment. Number 8, COVID affected families and grief. Perhaps one area that yet we have to dig deeper in the effects of COVID deaths is the effects of COVID deaths in families. It has been difficult to grieve loved ones, and a lot of this is painted in the hearts of the children. Many affected families who have not recovered from the trauma. And this trauma manifests itself often in violence in schools and in withdrawal in school community. When these young people go back to schools, where they have witnessed, on one hand we say the domestic violence, and then here they've witnessed death, suffering at its worst, which they are not able to engage, where they are not able to even sometimes attend and see their father or their mother sick. Then they are told their father has died. Then they can't even understand how they are hurrying this COVID burial. These kids end up in quite a bad mental health state. This trauma has to be addressed. I have journeyed with a number of families, and I'm speaking about situations. How easy it is to speak to an 8-year-old who has undergone the trauma of losing a parent from COVID, not understanding? How can you get to the heart? That's a very tough job to do. And by the way, an 8-year-old can be very violent if unleashed. I say this again from experience. When they have that trauma, they can become pretty wild. 9, COVID affected families and the inability to handle family circumstances. With this, I just comment. Many of us do not know what it means to suffer COVID. And I mean to go through the illness of COVID. is quite a devastating disease. Devastating because it deprives you of all the energy you need, all the mental capacity you need. And at times it doesn't show externally. And it lasts for a long period post-COVID. In families where mothers or fathers have been affected by this, the family, that parent is unable to actually have the family under control for a good while. And we assume he's just convalescent, but it is an issue that families sometimes get derailed. And 10, unresolved mental health issues of teachers. Teachers are also a member of our families. They are also a member of society. And some of these teachers have gone through a lot of trauma too, in many ways, during the long COVID illness, COVID lockdown. Therefore, some of them are in the schools with unresolved issues that they carried forward from the COVID period. Their own families may have been the issue. When they engage in teaching and they come back to the teaching ministry, some of their frustrations again is being meted out to these little ones. Having painted this rather sad panorama, what can we say in conclusion about a to-do? What is it that we can do ourselves? I have here just a few. I think we have to address the use of power. To know that families do not work on about power sharing. Families are not about who is in charge power. Families is a partnership. We must revisit the idea of family. And that is our business as faith communities. Let us own up that the family, dysfunction of family, is part of the cause. When partners are not willing to commit to one another and they are not living in a proper family setting at the outset, they are not capable many times to commit to the family parental care they should give to their children. And they are not able to carry through the difficulties that family life bring with it. So we as faith-based, we as faith communities must revive the idea of what is it to be in a proper family committed setting and overcome the casual family staying together situation. We must address the family dynamics by the problems the families meet. We must set up ways to address family difficulties and domestic violence. We may think about family clinics, because as already has said here, unless we address the family, we are not going to address really the problem of the kids. Number 2, we must, and in this context, very important, we must recover the value of human dignity and make it underpin our attitudes in all activities involving children. Our password when we are dealing with children must be dignity, so that we do not in any way do something that destroys the dignity, which we were told and reminded, image of God. This child is a piece of God, if you want to put it like that. If we recover those two, then we are able to carry through other now programmatic ideas. Because it is the family also is an image of God. The family itself is an image of God. And perhaps we have distorted that image ourselves by making it very hazy, undefined, make it uncommitted and not based on real selfless love, like God's love is. And we've made it less godly. We recover those 2 points, the rest will flow. Mental health programs addressing our youth, our young people, even under 9 years. They don't have to be in counseling session, but we can do group therapy in our own small activities we have in our church or mosque, madrasas, catechism, PMC, the Sunday school, all those things can be very, very good places to debrief and to return self-esteem, and even give them flags to notice situations they have to bail out from. When you are told to go into a house and it's not your mother's house, bail out. These are things we teach the little children. At least my mother told me not to eat when I go out there, because we were ready eating anything that we could get. And I remember they were telling, I'm sure many mothers say, when you go out there, don't eat anything you are given. At least that was what they used to tell us before. Nowadays, I don't think the mothers say that. But at least we can give points of reference. Number 4, mental health counseling programs for teachers and those who attend to children in our faith communities. Special programs. And this is not only to tell them to safeguard or commit. It is for them to commit to help these little ones blossom. It is a way of helping them also notice, and we need to tell them, signs of abuse. When a child is abused, there are signs that are obvious. The same, number 5, for teachers. Intensify non-school encounters with children, or we can provide safe environment and build their alertness, resilience, and restore their hope and trust in humans. I think that is something we can all do. I pray that, at least in the Catholic Church, we've been pushing this PMC. And PMC shouldn't just be a place where children come, sing, do this. Or Sunday school is not just to sing good songs. Or madrasa isn't just to recite whatever they have to learn. It is also a very good avenue to get to these children, to give them resilience, and to give them a certain instinct about what is good, as well as lights, red lights for what is wrong. 6, give specific attention to support programs, both human and spiritual, to domestic workers. Include domestic workers in a very specific ministry. But I will also say support programs also in rescue homes, which is something we should be doing. And rescue homes are not just to receive the people who have been abused. Rescue homes should have outreaches which are formative, which are sensitizing, which can work with all those other stakeholders willing to work with us. And then we must play a role, an active role in flagging child violence in communities. And here I want to conclude with just one interesting COVID experience. During the COVID lockdown, we've been trying to engage border people. And border operators at the beginning were feeling themselves as being victims. We engaged them in Nyeri so as to tell us the families that have difficulties and people who are sick. So we said, you are our ambassadors. You are the ones who are going all over. Inform us about anything that is happening out there of someone who is sick so that we can come and intervene. So suddenly they felt important and they became very, very good ambassadors of identifying situations of need. In that also we told them, identify for us people who desperately need food in those families that you're going, and those people must not be border riders. First, no border riders. The people you see, they were able to identify for us people who are needy. Then, as well, you have to be cunning. We also said, now identify a few of the border people who need help. And they were willing to come on board. Now, a lot of the accusations, especially to the older girls, many times is abuse from border riders. These are the very same ones who are going to give us a solution. If we engage in them, as we are now, about providing protection for school-going children, they are able to be somehow overseers of other borders, so that we create pools of those people who are trustworthy and are able to blow the whistle. These are practical ways in which we must go down to the ground to identify people who can partner with us. And they have a benefit, on the other hand, when we as faith communities also appreciate them. So for example, in Nyeri, we have appreciated them, and we are saying we are going to meet them, and we are going to celebrate them, and we are going to celebrate the best border. This kind of motivation ideas can also lead them away from the attraction of wrong motivation, or to become agents of wrong actions, to then become transforming agents even within their own apparently lowly profession. They can actually become our agents and ambassadors too of the fight against violence against children. This is what I wish to propose to you. This COVID has taught us a lot of lessons, but the biggest lesson, I would say, is innovation. If we can innovate in the way we are handling our children, in the way we are defending them, then we can be, once more, what we are supposed to be, a safety net for our children and a ray of hope, so that our children do not come out totally mistrusting society and adults, or come out damaged because of all this violence. But we are able to repair the damage and restore hope to them. Thank you very much for listening to me. Let us pray for the young people, the children, who are the predilect of God, and then God will give us ideas to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Most Reverend Anthony Muheria, for that talk on the impact of COVID-19 on families and child well-being. I have some few announcements. After this, all the participants pass by the registration desk there. The dignitaries to proceed for lunch, where they took their tea in the morning. And the afternoon session is to start at 2:10. So we have to hurry up for our lunch. And your moderator for the half day was Father Bernard Ngaruya, is myself. And therefore the next moderator will be Mr. Latif Shaban Subkem. So I don't want to waste a lot of time. Please let us stand and pray for lunch. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Bless us, Lord, and these are gifts that you're about to receive from your goodness, through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Good appetite.
Yes, I see some movement. Okay. Yes, our sister and somebody in this last somebody to help. Okay, thank you. So starting from, please come down here so that row, please count from number 1, 2, 3 up to 8. The same. Give people 1, 2, 3 up to 8. The same on this other side, 1, 2 up to 8. And please don't forget your number. Don't forget your number. It's 1 to 8. 1 to 8. Once you get to 8, you start 1. Up to 8, then you start 1. Then up to 8, then you start 1. Are you through? We're through. Number 1 to 8, 1 to 8. I think this row is the one that has the largest number. So I'll ask that, can I see all the number ones? Please stand up. I want to pair you with all the number 5s. Where are the number 5s? Be upstanding. I'll request that you get a space, all of you, 1 and 5, find a space there so that you can sit in that group. That is group number 1. Group number 2 will have the number 2s. Those ones who are number 2, where are they? The number 2s. Number 2. Great. I want to group you with number 6. Number 6. All right. Please come in front here, number 2 and 6. All right, we need to do a little adjustment once again. In view of the numbers that we have, we will wish to readjust again. Let's have all the number 1s meet here, and behind them we have number 2. Then here we have number 3. We are again restructuring the groupings. We are restructuring the groupings. Sorry for that. So we are not, okay, all number 1s, where are you? Number 1s are sit in front. Number 2, where are you? Number 2, just sit behind. Let's try to separate ourselves. Number 3, come in front here. Number 3, come in front here. Number 3, sit in front here. Now, where that lady is seated, please raise up your hand. Please, number 4, can you join her? If you took number 4, please join her. Number 4, join with that lady. Please, can you stand so they can be able to see you? My sister, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Number 4's, number 5, where are you? Number 5, I'll ask that we skip one row and the second one, then we sit. From where our sister, who is number 5, is seated, we skip that row, then we move from the second row. That's where I want us to have number 5. That is number 5. How many took number 5? The number 5s. Please be standing so that you can sit in a group. Number 6. Number 6. All right. Number 6, come closer here where our sister is. Sister, please, can you stand? Number 6, come here. Number 7, Number 7. How many are you? You're many. Just come closer to where our sister is, the one who is standing in black and white. Join her. Number 7, join our sister there. Number 8, let me see, how many are you? Good. Number 8 at the far end, at the back. Number 8 at the back. How many took numbers 8? Number 8 at the back. This is the most important part of the program, where we're going to give our input in terms of discussions. The views that we will present will be put into consideration. Let's try to expand our knowledge about it. Let's try to dig deep. Let's try to have a candid discussion about the questions that have been that will be shared with us. Is there anybody who doesn't have a group? Anybody who doesn't have a number? Sister Imelda will share with you the questions. And she will be briefing you on what you need to do. Imelda, is that okay? So ensure that you get the instructions clearly from her in regards what you're supposed to do. All right, all right. Please ensure that you get instructions clearly. I want to believe that Brother Kefa has already sent you the questions, and you have been grouped in your various groups, and you have been sent a link where you will also participate in the discussions. You'll also be given the moderators and the rapporteurs that will also help you in your online discussions. We want to appreciate those ones who are following virtually for the good work that you are also doing. So which group has not been served? The time allocated for the group discussion was 1 hour. We are running late, but we'll try as much as possible to see whether we can have the discussions within 45 minutes. If there will be need, there will be a very short extension of time. Those ones who have been served by Imelda, please, you can start your discussions. the rapporteur, please ensure that you write every whatever you agree, please write legibly. Write legibly. Write like a teacher and not like a doctor. The online ones, we want to believe that
Okay. Good afternoon to the people on Zoom. We have around 40-something people who've not joined the breakout rooms, so I'm going to take you quickly through it. On your screens, you should be able to see a small box on the far left. When you just tap on your screen, you'll be able to see a small box called breakout rooms.